The moonlight barely touched the edges of the tobacco fields in Virginia, casting long, skeletal shadows across the rows of crop that demanded everything from the people forced to tend them. Deep in the quiet of the night, a hidden transaction took place near the edge of the woods, a silent exchange that defied the logic of a system built on total ownership. Before we delve into this clandestine world, where the enslaved carved out autonomy from the jaws of oppression, please consider subscribing to the Ink of History to ensure you never miss these deep dives into the forgotten currents of the past. Imagine a world where your labor belongs to another, yet your ingenuity belongs only to you. This is not a story of passive victimhood, but a complex, dangerous, and brilliantly executed saga of a secret economy. It is the history of the enslaved in America, not just as laborers, but as entrepreneurs, traders, and architects of their own survival. The institution of slavery in the United States is often painted in broad, monochromatic strokes of absolute misery and total dispossession. We are told the story of the field, the whip, and the shackles, and while those horrors were the foundation of the system, they were not the entirety of the human experience within it. Beneath the surface of the dominant economy, there thrived a shadow world, a hidden system of trade, craftsmanship, and resourcefulness that allowed many enslaved people to accumulate small caches of wealth. This was not wealth in the sense of grand estates or vast bank accounts, but in the form of coins, goods, and leverage. It was a secret economy built on the scraps of time left over after the dawn to dusk labor of the master was finished. To understand this, we must first look at the paradox of the plantation. Masters required their labor force to be productive, yet they often found it more efficient to allow enslaved people to hunt, garden, or craft goods for their own sustenance. This necessity created a crack in the monolith of ownership. In the low country of South Carolina or the river valleys of the Chesapeake, an enslaved man might be tasked with the cultivation of the main crop, but his evenings belonged, in some small measure, to the earth he tended in his own small patch. Here he grew vegetables, raised a few chickens, or perhaps carved tools that were superior to the mass-produced ones provided by the overseer. These were not mere hobbies. These were the origins of a private trade. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the enslaved person became a producer of surplus. They would trade these goods with other enslaved people, with free black neighbors, and sometimes even with impoverished white farmers who were desperate for quality produce or handcrafted items. This internal market was a manifestation of resistance. It was an assertion of identity and a reclamation of the fruits of one's own labor. It was also incredibly dangerous. To possess money was to invite suspicion, yet many persisted, keeping their hoards buried beneath floorboards or hidden in the lining of patched clothing. Consider the life of a skilled blacksmith or a carpenter during the antebellum period. These individuals were often hired out by their masters to neighboring plantations or to townspeople for a fee. The master kept the lion's share of the profit, but through negotiation or sheer force of personality, some enslaved artisans managed to secure a portion of their earnings for themselves. This allowed them to enter the marketplace as participants rather than as objects of trade. They bought their own clothes, sometimes they bought the freedom of a spouse, and in rare but documented cases, they saved enough to purchase their own manumission. This secret economy was not just about survival, it was about the psychological preservation of the self. By mastering a craft and finding value in the marketplace, they proved to themselves that they were not merely the property their owners claimed them to be. They were laborers with agency, traders with intuition, and people with a vision of a future that did not involve living at the whim of another. The risks associated with this economic activity were immense. The laws of the time were designed to prevent any form of financial independence among the enslaved. Any money found on an enslaved person could be confiscated, and the punishment for unauthorized trade was swift and brutal. Yet the drive to build this wealth persisted because it served as a buffer against the whims of the master. Imagine the fear of being sold, a constant shadow hanging over every family. Having a small stash of money provided a sliver of hope, a way to potentially bribe a guard, pay for a forged document, or secure passage on a riverboat. It was a currency of hope in a system of despair. These transactions were often conducted in total silence. communicated through nods, glances, and the shared understanding of those who lived under the same yoke. The marketplace was a network of trust, a clandestine web that stretched across counties and states. As we examine these hidden records, we find that women were central to this economy. While men often focused on crafts or market gardening, women were frequently the managers of the domestic economy, selling eggs, butter, soap, and intricate textiles. Their role was crucial in sustaining the family unit, providing the additional nutrients and clothing that the master's rations failed to supply. They were the silent bankers of the quarters, the ones who calculated the value of a chicken against a yard of cloth, the ones who knew exactly who could be trusted with a secret trade. This gendered division of labor created a more resilient and versatile underground market. It was a network that was inherently communal, as the wealth generated was almost always shared to benefit the broader community of the oppressed. It was a collective act of defiance against a system that sought to atomize and isolate every individual. Why was this allowed to exist? Historians often point to the functional necessity of the system. Even the most hardened slaveholder realized that a self-sustaining slave was a cheaper slave to maintain. By allowing them to garden or hunt, the master shifted the burden of survival onto the enslaved, effectively subsidizing their own profit margins. It was a cold, calculated efficiency, yet it backfired in the most profound way. It gave the enslaved the tools, the contacts, and the psychological framework to envision a life outside of their shackles. Every coin earned was a step away from total dependency. Every trade completed was an act of subversion. The master thought he was saving money on rations. In fact, he was facilitating the birth of an independent spirit that would eventually contribute to the crumbling of the institution itself. When we look at the figures who were prominent in these underground activities, we see men and women of extraordinary intelligence and nerve. They possessed the ability to read the marketplace, to understand supply and demand, and to navigate the treacherous waters of local politics. They had to be excellent judges of character, knowing exactly who would report them and who would trade with them. This was a high-stakes game of survival where the rules were rigged, yet they managed to find ways to thrive. Many of these stories have been lost to time because they were never recorded in the ledgers of the plantation owners. They lived in the oral traditions, in the whispered accounts passed down through generations, and in the fragments of diaries left by those who eventually reached freedom. As the 19th century progressed, the tensions surrounding this secret economy grew. As industrialization began to seep into the South, the value of skilled labor increased, and the desire among the enslaved to earn for themselves grew alongside it. Masters began to crack down, passing stricter laws to prevent the hiring out of enslaved people and to limit the movement of goods. Yet the trade did not stop. It merely moved further into the shadows. It became more sophisticated, more cautious, and more vital than ever before. The conflict between the master's desire for control and the enslaved person's need for agency became a defining tension of the era. This was a battle fought not with muskets, but with market stalls, hidden coins, and silent deals. We must also consider the role of the free black population in this nexus. Free black individuals served as the vital link between the enslaved and the wider world. They provided the legal cover for trade, the connections to outside markets, and sometimes the sanctuary for those who had saved enough to flee. This partnership was a powerful force of resistance. It bridged the gap between slavery and freedom, creating a continuum of struggle that united all black people in America against a common enemy. The secret economy was not just a plantation phenomenon. It was a regional force that utilized the mobility of free people to circulate goods and information. This was a sophisticated operation, a clandestine infrastructure that operated under the noses of the local authorities. The consequences of this activity were far-reaching. When the Civil War finally broke out, the networks of trust and communication established through the secret economy proved to be essential. The same routes used to smuggle goods were used to relay information about Union troop movements. The same people who knew how to operate outside the law were the ones who became scouts, guides, and informants for the Northern cause.
The secret economy had transformed into a foundation for political intelligence. It is a testament to the resilience of those who, despite being treated as property, functioned as active, strategic, and profoundly human participants in the economy of their time. They were never just passive victims. They were the architects of their own survival. As we reflect on these stories, we must ask ourselves what these actions tell us about the human spirit. The capacity to find meaning, to build systems of order, and to create value in an environment designed to strip away all dignity is the ultimate mark of human resilience. The enslaved did not leave the economy to the masters. They built their own. They turned the very tools of their oppression into the instruments of their sustenance. This is a story of profound courage, a narrative that demands we look beyond the obvious structures of history and into the corners where the true story of human achievement often hides. The secrecy of their transactions was their shield, but the strength of their resolve was their weapon. We are left to grapple with the reality that history is not just what is written by those in power, but what is lived by those who are marginalized. By uncovering the secrets of this underground economy, we gain a more nuanced understanding of the fight for freedom in America. It was not a sudden explosion of liberty, but a long, slow, and meticulously planned struggle, $1 and one day at a time. It is a story that should remind us that even in the darkest circumstances, the human desire for autonomy and the drive to create, trade, and survive can never be fully extinguished. The legacy of these men and women lives on in the entrepreneurial spirit that has defined so much of the African American experience throughout the centuries. As we conclude this exploration, it is important to remember the human cost of this struggle. Every coin hidden was a testament to a life lived in fear, and every trade made was a gamble with one's own body and future. The peace and humanity we strive for today are built on the foundations laid by those who fought for their own, even when the world told them they had none. The history of the enslaved in America is a mosaic of tragedy and triumph, and the secret economy is one of its most compelling pieces. It challenges our assumptions, forces us to question our definitions of wealth and power, and invites us to see the enslaved not as figures of pity, but as individuals of immense agency and intellect. If this investigation into the hidden corners of the past has moved you, or if you feel a connection to these stories of resilience, please consider sharing this video with those who value the truth of our collective history. Your engagement helps ensure that these narratives continue to reach the eyes and ears of those who seek to understand the complexities of our past. Consider supporting the channel further by exploring our archival content, where we continue to peel back the layers of history, one story at a time. The battle for memory is ongoing, and by participating in this conversation, you are helping to preserve the legacies of those who were never allowed to speak for themselves. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the secret economy, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. As we close this chapter, let us hold on to the knowledge that no system, no matter how oppressive, can ever fully erase the ingenuity and the humanity of those who refuse to stop fighting for their right to build their own lives, their own wealth, and their own future. Remember that history is the ink we use to write our future, so let us ensure we tell the full story. Stay curious, stay engaged, and never forget the strength of those who paved the way. There is always more to uncover, more to learn, and more to share. So join us next time as we continue to shine a light on the hidden history of the American experience. Your support is the engine behind this mission, and we are honored to have you with us as we uncover the truths that have been buried for too long. Peace is not just the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice, and we can only achieve that when we understand the true cost of the past. Thank you for being a part of this important conversation. The echoes of that hidden economy do not merely fade into the footnotes of textbooks. They resonate in the very architecture of our modern understanding of labor, property, and the persistent desire for autonomy. When we cast our gaze deeper into the 19th century landscape, beyond the monolithic structures of the plantation system, we find an intricate web of subterranean commerce that functioned as a lifeline for those living under the crushing weight of systemic bondage. This was not merely about survival. It was about the assertion of selfhood in an environment designed to strip it away. The enslaved person who cultivated a small garden plot by moonlight, or the blacksmith who fashioned iron tools after his master's work was done, was participating in a clandestine revolution of the spirit. Each extra potato sold at a local market, each basket woven and traded, and each saved coin hidden beneath a floorboard represented a profound defiance of the legal designation of human as property. To own something, even a trivial object, was to possess a fragment of one's own existence that the state could not entirely claim. Consider the role of the Sunday markets, those vibrant, dusty hubs of exchange that flourished on the fringes of urban centers like Charleston, New Orleans, and Savannah. Here, the rigid hierarchies of the day momentarily buckled. An enslaved woman arriving with a basket of surplus vegetables and handmade lace was not simply conducting a transaction. She was navigating a complex geopolitical landscape, assessing the needs of the community and the whims of the buyers, and exercising a degree of commercial sovereignty that was theoretically impossible. These marketplaces were information exchanges as much as sites of commerce. News of local unrest, the movement of troops, the arrival of ships, and the shifting attitudes of the white populace flowed through the stalls. The currency used was not just silver or copper. It was intelligence, trust, and the quiet solidarity of a community that operated by its own unspoken rules. The authorities often viewed these gatherings with suspicion, passing ordinances to curtail them, yet they remained indispensable. The white elite, despite their proclamations of superiority, relied on the produce and the services provided by the very people they sought to subjugate. This dependency created a fascinating paradox. The system that thrived on the total control of the laborer was simultaneously sustained by the laborer's hidden, independent economic activity. It is critical to examine the psychological weight of this autonomy. When an enslaved individual managed to accumulate enough capital to purchase their own freedom, or the freedom of a spouse or child, the act of expenditure became a political statement of the highest order. The purchase of manumission was not just a legal transaction. It was a reclamation of the body and the soul. Yet, the price often went beyond the monetary. It required navigating a legal system that was inherently hostile, filing petitions, securing manumission papers, and enduring the constant threat of betrayal or re-enslavement. The documents that survive, the handwritten receipts, the manumission records, the accounts of local merchants, offer only a skeletal view of these lives. To flesh out this history, we must look at the material culture that remains. Archaeologists have uncovered caches of coins, beads, and personal items tucked away in the foundations of slave dwellings. These artifacts are not merely debris. They are the tangible evidence of a life lived in the margins, a testament to the persistence of individual identity when society demands assimilation or erasure. Furthermore, we must address the role of the informal labor market in the broader American economy. Much of the infrastructure of the early South, the roads, the buildings, the very systems of agriculture, was built and maintained by individuals who were forced to adapt to the constraints of their environment. The expertise required to navigate the harsh realities of the enslaved life fostered a unique set of skills that were often repurposed for the benefit of the individual. Those who were skilled in carpentry, midwifery, or animal husbandry used these talents to negotiate, however tenuously, for better conditions or for the time to work for themselves. This negotiation was a constant, grueling process. It required an acute understanding of the master's psyche, the legal boundaries of the state, and the opportunities of the local market. It was an intellectual labor that required immense foresight and emotional intelligence, qualities that the prevailing ideology of the time sought to deny to the enslaved population. As we continue to peel back these layers, we find that the secret economy was also a site of technological and cultural innovation. The blending of African traditions with the necessities of the American environment resulted in new methods of cultivation, new artisanal techniques, and new forms of social organization. The seeds that were carried across the Atlantic, hidden in the hair or the pockets of those who endured the Middle Passage, became the foundation of garden plots that provided both nutrition and a connection to an ancestral past. These gardens were more than a source of food, they were spaces of memory. In the act of growing crops that were culturally significant, the enslaved were resisting the complete erasure of their heritage. They were asserting their right to define their own dietary, social, and cultural needs. We must also confront the difficult reality that this secret economy existed within a system of extreme violence. The risk of discovery was constant, and the penalties were severe. The fear of being caught with property, or of being accused of theft for possessing goods that one had actually produced, was a shadow that never left. Yet, the resilience required to manage these risks is a testament to the human capacity for agency. When we study this, we are not romanticizing the institution of slavery. We are honoring the individuals who refuse to be defined by it. We are acknowledging the immense courage it took to operate within and against such a brutal regime. This history challenges us to redefine our understanding of power. We often view power as a top-down force, exerted by governments and institutions. But the history of the secret economy proves that power is also located in the cracks, in the persistent, quiet, and defiant actions of the everyday person. The scholarship on this topic has grown significantly in recent years, revealing a more nuanced portrait of the enslaved experience than was previously available. By cross-referencing probate inventories, merchant ledgers, and court records with oral histories and archaeological findings, researchers are piecing together a mosaic that is both heartbreaking and empowering. We now understand that the internal economy was not just a side note. It was a fundamental component of the socio-economic life of the period. It shaped the relationships between enslaved people and the broader community, and it created pathways to freedom that would have otherwise been inaccessible. Every dollar earned, every trade made, and every secret saved was a strike against the dehumanizing logic of the slave system. As we look toward the future, these lessons remain vital. We live in a world where economic marginalization still exists, where many are forced to navigate systems that are not designed for their success. The story of those who built their own wealth and autonomy under the most repressive conditions is a powerful reminder of the endurance of the human spirit. It inspires us to look for the hidden nodes of resistance in our own time, to support those who are building their own paths to agency, and to remain vigilant in our efforts to ensure that the voices of the marginalized are not silenced. Our collective history is a vast and complicated tapestry, and while many of its threads were woven in darkness, there were always those who were creating their own light. It is our duty to keep telling these stories, for they are the foundation upon which a more equitable future can be built. The battle for memory is a battle for our own humanity. By acknowledging the full scope of the past, the good, the bad, and the hidden, we grow in our capacity for empathy and understanding. We learn to see the individuals behind the statistics, the people behind the labels, and the history behind the present. The secret economy was not just a way to trade goods. It was a way to trade in hope. It was a way to maintain a sense of self when everything else was being taken away. Let us continue to honor their legacy by seeking the truth, by sharing the stories that have been buried, and by ensuring that the struggles of the past inform the justice of the future. The journey we have taken through the archives and the archaeological sites is only the beginning. There are countless more stories waiting to be unearthed, more voices waiting to be heard, and more corners of the past that demand our attention. As we move forward, let us carry the knowledge that resistance is not always a grand, public declaration. Sometimes, it is the quiet acquisition of a small piece of land, the careful saving of a few coins, or the simple act of growing a garden in the moonlight. These are the sparks that eventually ignite the fires of change. Let us commit ourselves to being the chroniclers of this resilience, the protectors of this memory, and the students of this profound human history. The secrets of the past are not just for us to uncover. They are for us to learn from, to grow from, and to carry into the world as we work toward a more just and informed existence. Thank you for walking this path with us, and for recognizing the importance of holding on to the truths that have been fought for so dearly. The story of the secret economy is the story of America, and it is a story that requires all of us to fully understand. Stay curious, stay questioning, and let the echoes of the past guide you toward a brighter, more honest future. The work continues, and with your help, we will continue to shine that light into the deepest recesses of our collective memory, ensuring that the ingenuity and the humanity of those who came before continue to inspire us all. To truly grasp the magnitude of this clandestine financial landscape, one must look beyond the individual act of survival and consider the structural complexity of what was essentially an underground banking system. We often conceive of history as a series of monumental events, battles, legislation, and public speeches, but the secret economy functioned as a parallel reality, a shadow infrastructure that kept families fed, weddings funded, and dreams alive when the formal economy of the time sought to render them entirely destitute. This was not merely barter. It was an intricate network of credit, debt, and trust that spanned counties and states, operating entirely outside the purview of the state institutions that kept the official ledgers. Consider the role of the Sunday markets, which historians have only recently begun to map with any degree of accuracy. In the quiet pockets of the rural South, and indeed in the bustling outskirts of northern industrial towns, these gatherings were the lifeblood of an invisible commerce. They were disguised as communal prayer or respite, but for those in the know, they were clearinghouses. A woman might trade a surplus of woven goods for a parcel of land deeded in a proxy name, while a man might exchange specialized labor for the promise of a future transit. These exchanges were governed by a code of ethics that surpassed the legalistic requirements of the period. In a world where contracts could be voided by a stroke of a pen or a change in law, the secret economy relied on something far more durable: the preservation of reputation and the sanctity of the word. If you defaulted on a debt in this shadow world, the consequences were not legal, but communal. You would be cut off from the network, a fate far more terrifying than any fine or imprisonment, as it meant losing the only safety net available in a society designed to let you fail. The artifacts we find today, the caches of buried coins, the hollowed-out tools used to transport paper currency, the ledgers written in codes that seem like gibberish to the untrained eye, are the physical remnants of this ingenuity. They speak to a level of intelligence and strategic foresight that has been systematically ignored by traditional economic histories. We are often told that the marginalized were passive participants in the economy, waiting for structural change to improve their circumstances. The reality, as evidenced by these hidden caches, is that they were active, aggressive, and highly successful entrepreneurs working against impossible odds. They manipulated currency devaluation to their advantage. They moved goods across restricted borders with the skill of modern supply chain managers, and they established micro-lending circles that rival the sophistication of modern credit unions. When we examine the ledger books retrieved from the floorboards of cabins or the lining of forgotten trunks, we are not looking at simple shopping lists. We are looking at maps of human connectivity. We see records of collective funds gathered to purchase the freedom of a relative, marked by small, meticulous notations of contributions. We see the accounting of families who pooled their meager assets to buy seeds, tools, and materials that would eventually turn a barren plot of land into a self-sustaining farm. This was high-stakes finance conducted in the dark. It was a form of economic warfare against a system that viewed the accumulation of wealth by the marginalized as an existential threat to the social order. The psychological toll of maintaining this secret must also be acknowledged. To live in a world where you must hide your prosperity, or even your basic ability to sustain yourself, is to live in a state of perpetual vigilance. Every transaction required a performative innocence, a constant masking of intent. This required a level of mental agility that few modern observers can fully comprehend. You had to be an actor, a strategist, and a diplomat, all while performing the grueling physical tasks assigned to you by the dominant power structure. Yet, in the quiet moments of the night, when the accounts were reconciled and the coin bags were hidden away, there was a profound sense of empowerment. They were not merely surviving, they were building. They were crafting a future that did not exist yet, a future that they were financing one transaction at a time. As we look toward the future, the implications of this secret economy become even more vital. We are currently living in an era where digital surveillance and economic transparency are becoming absolute. The ability to exist outside the formal gaze is disappearing, and with it, perhaps, a certain kind of radical autonomy. Studying the secret economy of the past provides us with a blueprint for how to maintain agency and build community in the face of stifling oversight. It teaches us that resources are not just capital, they are relationships. True wealth, in this historical context, was not just the coins in one's pocket, but the reliability of the person to whom you gave them. If we wish to foster more resilient communities today, We might do well to look back at these examples of mutual aid and decentralized trust. We must also confront the difficult truth that much of this history has been intentionally erased. It was not just that these stories were lost to time. They were hidden to keep the participants safe long after their labor had ceased. The fear of retaliation, of government seizure, or of social backlash kept these accounts locked away for generations. Today, we have the privilege of being the generation that can finally break the seal. We are the ones who can look at these artifacts not as evidence of crimes, but as evidence of genius. We can finally give these individuals the recognition they deserve as the silent architects of their own liberation. Think, for a moment, of the sheer courage it took to engage in this economy. To step out of the shadows for a transaction was to risk everything. If you were caught, you weren't just losing your assets. You were losing your status, your safety, and your hope. Yet, the work continued. It continued because the need was absolute and the desire for self-determination was stronger than the fear of the consequences. This was not a hobby. It was a way of declaring humanity in a system that sought to reduce people to inventory. Every coin buried, every ledger hidden, was an assertion of identity. It was a way of saying, I am here, I am counting, and I am planning for a day that belongs to me. As our investigation continues, we must also refine our methodology. We can no longer rely solely on the written word, which was often authored by those who had a vested interest in obscuring these activities. We must look to the forensic analysis of landscapes, the ethnographic memories preserved in oral traditions, and the material culture that has been left behind in forgotten places. We must listen for what is not being said in the official records. When a local census fails to account for a sudden improvement in a family's circumstances, we must look for the secret economy of that village. When a town's infrastructure appears to have been developed through means that don't align with the tax base, we must wonder about the networks of support that existed beneath the surface. The conclusion of this journey is not a final destination, but a new point of departure. We have moved from a position of ignorance to one of awareness, and now we must move to a position of advocacy. We must ensure that these stories are woven into the broader tapestry of our national history. They belong in our classrooms, in our museums, and in the civic consciousness of our society. We cannot claim to understand the economic development of our country until we understand the secret, vital engines that powered it from the bottom up. We owe it to the ghosts of the past to ensure that their struggle is recognized, and we owe it to ourselves to harness the lessons of their resilience. In these final reflections, I urge you to look at your own surroundings with fresh eyes. Consider the hidden histories of your own streets, the forgotten transactions that occurred on the ground where you currently stand. Every place has its secret economy, its history of underground support and quiet resistance. By seeking out these stories, by asking the difficult questions, and by valuing the ingenuity of those who refuse to be defined by their circumstances, we become partners in this ongoing work. We become the keepers of the flame, ensuring that the light of memory continues to burn bright against the darkness of oblivion. The path forward is clear. We must continue to document, to preserve, and to honor. We must fight against the sanitization of history that seeks to simplify the past into comfortable, digestible narratives. The truth is often messy, complicated, and hidden in the spaces between the lines, but it is precisely this complexity that makes it worth fighting for. As we close this chapter, let us resolve to remain vigilant seekers of the truth, to be the ones who hold the candle to the recesses of our history, and to never forget that the most profound acts of defiance are often the ones that leave the smallest footprints. The secret economy was the bedrock upon which so much was built, and it is a legacy that, once understood, changes everything we think we know about the resilience of the human spirit. Carry these stories with you. Let them influence your perspective on what is possible when people come together, even in the most restricted environments, to create something out of nothing. The ingenuity that enabled these secret networks to thrive is the same ingenuity that we need today to solve the complex problems of our own time. It is the capacity to envision a different reality, to act with collective purpose, and to persist when the odds seem insurmountable. This is the ultimate lesson of the secret economy, that even in the darkest of times, the light of human agency, if carefully tended, can never be fully extinguished. Let us honor that spirit, let us learn from that perseverance, and let us continue to work toward a future that is as honest, as enlightened, and as courageous as the people who came before us. This is not just history. It is an enduring mandate for the present, a call to action that echoes across the decades, urging us to recognize the humanity in every story and the value in every hidden, hard-won truth. The archives are open, the earth is yielding its secrets, and the work of reconstruction is far from over. Journey with us, stay committed to the search, and let the echoes of the past serve as the foundation for a future where no one's history is forced to remain a secret. To understand the mechanics of this hidden resilience, we must look closer at the artifacts left behind, the mundane objects that served as the silent conduits of necessity. The ledger books, often disguised as simple account journals for household expenses, reveal a complex tapestry of barter and mutual aid that operated beneath the official gaze of the state. These were not merely economic transactions, they were social contracts, forged in the crucible of scarcity. When a weaver exchanged a bolt of cloth for a physician's promise of medical care, or when a communal kitchen redistributed grain under the veil of a charity banquet, they were weaving a safety net that the official governance had long since shredded. This was an economy of empathy, a radical reclamation of autonomy where value was not dictated by market fluctuations or state mandates, but by the tangible needs of neighbors and the weight of mutual trust. The geography of this economy was equally fascinating. It lived in the porous boundaries of the city, in the alleyways where the lighting never reached and the official censors never tread. Every cellar floor hiding a stockpile of prohibited texts, every hollowed-out floorboard containing rationed seeds, represented a tactical victory against a regime of control. The people involved were not merely surviving, they were practicing a form of quiet, persistent rebellion. They understood that to control the means of distribution was to control the means of existence, and by reclaiming these channels, they carved out a space of sovereignty that no decree could fully erase. This decentralized power, fragmented and elusive as it was, proved far more durable than the rigid, centralized bureaucracies that sought to suppress it. Consider the role of the messengers, those unsung figures who moved between these nodes of resistance. They were the circulatory system of the secret economy, carrying not just goods, but the vital information that allowed the network to adapt to the shifting tides of surveillance. Their language was a masterpiece of subtext. A casual mention of the weather, a specific song hummed in a marketplace, or the way a hat was tilted. These were all signals, layers of communication designed to preserve the integrity of the underground without ever putting it to paper. It was a culture of high-stakes improvisation, where a single miscalculation could lead to ruin. Yet, the persistence of these networks suggests that the instinct for connection is perhaps the most fundamental aspect of our composition. When the structures of power fail, humans do not simply succumb to the vacuum. They build anew, often reverting to the most ancient and effective systems of exchange: the handshake, the promise, and the shared burden. Furthermore, we must address the psychological toll of this dual existence. Living in a world where one must constantly police their own speech and actions produces a profound kind of exhaustion. But it also produces a heightened awareness of the fragility of truth. Participants in the secret economy developed a keen eye for the difference between the performative compliance demanded by authorities and the genuine alliances formed in the shadows. This duality created a generation of observers, people who could walk through the world seeing two realities simultaneously: the one presented by the state, and the one lived in the backrooms and hidden passages. It is this bifurcated perspective that allowed them to survive, but it is also what gives their history its haunting, dualistic beauty. They were pioneers of a reality that was never meant to be seen, shaping a world that existed solely through their willingness to protect it. As we move forward into an age of unprecedented digital surveillance, the lessons of the secret economy become strikingly relevant. Today, the shadows have moved from the cobblestone alleys to the encrypted corners of the Internet. The tools have changed, but the imperative remains identical: the need to preserve human dignity against systems that seek to standardize, monitor, and ultimately commodify our existence. The secret economy reminds us that power is never truly absolute. There is always a space that cannot be fully catalogued, a transaction that cannot be fully tracked, and a human connection that defies the reach of the machine. The archives we study today are merely the skeletal remains of a vibrant living network that once pulsed with the urgency of survival. In the final reckoning, the history of the secret economy is a narrative of hope. It asserts that even when the official record is written by victors or tyrants, the truth has a way of persisting through the cracks. It survives in the oral histories passed down in whispers, in the physical artifacts unearthed by archaeologists, and in the persistent, stubborn memory of the communities that refuse to be defined by their oppression. Our work is to listen to these whispers and to translate them into a language that informs our own path. We are the inheritors of this audacity. By acknowledging the secret economy, we are not just remembering the past. We are validating the resilience of our ancestors and asserting our own capacity to build something better. The era of silence ends when we decide to speak. The era of surveillance ends when we reclaim our right to private association. As we step away from this history, let us recognize that the most significant threads of the human story are the ones that were woven in the dark, waiting for the light of history to finally reveal their strength. The work is ours now. Let us carry it forward with the same quiet, persistent, and unyielding grace.